Hare Krishna. So, right now, about a block away from here, there's a huge festival going on. The Festival of the Holy Name. And there are hundreds of people, and there are tents all set up, and free prasadam everywhere. And everyone's chanting. It's been going on for 2 days. Tomorrow morning it'll be finished. But it's wonderful. I went for a couple hours with a friend. We went. Hare Krishna. But now I'm back at the house. Nice and quiet here. Festival's going on over there. And I was going to read a little bit. Prabhupada Lila by Satsvarupa Goswami. Prabhupada, he hasn't left India yet, but he's about ready to leave because nothing's working out in India. And he is now penniless, no place to live. He's a sannyasi, but he is writing, and he's translating, and he's getting his magazines printed. So, here we are, in India. One night, Abai had a striking dream. The same dream he had had several times before during his days as a householder. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati appeared, just as Abai had known him, tall, scholarly sannyasi, coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abai and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly he called and motioned. He was asking Abai to take sannyas. Come here, become sannyasi. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instruction Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter. Become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, why would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? Abai reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish the mission. Formerly, the time was not right. Abai deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyas, a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind, and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that they could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proved perilous even for the Gaudiya Math's most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless, incapable feeling he had expressed in his Viraha Ashtika was there. It's a poem he wrote about feeling helpless. But now his spiritual master was beckoning him over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach, just as his spiritual master had preached, remained within him. A fierce, though sometimes quietly expressed, determination. The Vedic standard and the example set by the previous Acharyas was that if one wanted to lead a preaching movement, sannyas was required. Srila Bhaktivedanta had taken sannyas to facilitate his missionary work. Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but when his young students had been disrespectful toward him, treating him as an ordinary man, he had taken sannyas. Because a sannyasi is automatically respected. Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas was a calculated tactic. As soon as he began traveling throughout India as a sannyasi, he immediately attracted thousands of followers to the Sankirtan movement. Knowing that many cheaters would accept the saffron dress and abuse the respect given to sannyasis, Lord Chaitanya had advised against accepting sannyas in the age of Kali. He knew that cheaters, in the guise of sadhus, would act immorally, accumulate funds for their own sense gratification, and make many followers simply to enhance their own prestige. Posing as swamis, they would cheat the public. Because the people in Kali Yuga are unable to follow rules and regulations of sannyas, Lord Chaitanya had recommended that they simply chant Hare Krishna. However, if a person could actually follow the rules, and especially if he had to spread the Sankirtan movement, sannyas was necessary. Abai first had to approach one of his godbrothers for permission. He decided to turn to Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj, formerly Kunja Bihari, the leader of the Chaitanya Mat in Calcutta. Abai still thought of the Chaitanya Mat as the headquarters of his spiritual master's mission. During the heated legal disputes, the Chaitanya Mat had been the most prized acquisition, and since 1948, it had been under the legal ownership of Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj. Now, although each sannyasi had his own place or places, the Chaitanya Mat and Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj legally represented the Gaudiya Mat entity. Abai felt that if he were to take sannyas and go preach in America, he should give the Chaitanya Mat the first opportunity to support his work. In April 1959, Abai wrote to Tirtha Maharaj inquiring about sannyas as well as about the Chaitanya Mat, printing some of his manuscripts. And since no one was going abroad, he volunteered to do so on behalf of the Chaitanya Mat. Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj replied that Abai should first join the Chaitanya Mat. He mentioned the strife that still lingered. Quote, "Those who are acting against Chaitanya Mat, they're motivated by their individual ambitions." End quote. Anyone who was against the Chaitanya Mat, he said, was acting illogically and against the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So according to Tirtha Maharaj, the thing for Abai to do, the thing he had neglected to do for so many years, was to join the Chaitanya Mat and act under his direction. Tirtha Maharaj mentioned several members of the Chaitanya Mat who had recently accepted sannyas order, and he said that Abai could also become one in time. He invited Abai to come and reside at Chaitanya Mat. Quote, "The houses that we have, there are rooms that are airy and well lit. We will treat you exclusively. There won't be any difficulty. We will take care that no inconveniences are caused." End quote. But as for printing books, Bhakti Tirtha wrote, "We are eagerly awaiting to print the books like Satsvarupa, Vedanta, based on devotional service, and many other rare books by the Goswamis. First, we will print them. Books written by you will be checked by the editorial staff, and if funds can be raised, then they can be printed according to priority. The books will be printed only if they are favorable for the service of the Chaitanya Mat. Therefore, if the fund is raised, then there is a plan to go abroad as well. Abai was not encouraged. The main difficulty he felt was the Chaitanya Mat's shortage of funds. So Srila Prabhupada said, I was working with my broken typewriter. I went to our Tirtha Maharaj. Quote, you give me a room and print my books. Give me some money, I will join you. I had thought. This is Guru Maharaj's institution. He did not say no, but the printing of books was a difficult task for him. He had no money. He was hardly collecting for maintaining. Printing of books is a big job, and there is no guarantee of sale. Without printing books and going to the West, sannyas did not have meaning for Abai. And who knew when Tirtha Maharaj would sanction that his taking sannyas? There was no point going to Calcutta just to reside in an airy, well-lit room that he already had in Vrindavan. Abai wrote back to Tirtha Maharaj mentioning his direct order from Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati to preach to the English-speaking people. He wanted to go to the West right away, and he had thought Chaitanya Mat would welcome his offer. Both Abai and Tirtha Maharaj had the responsibilities, but perhaps they could work together to carry out the desire of the spiritual master. Abai asked Tirtha Maharaj to reconsider. On May 7, 1959, Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj wrote back. My suggestion is, don't make any hasty decisions. For the time being, you stay with us, engage yourself in the service of the society, and then accept Tridanda sannyas. The purpose of accepting Tridanda is to serve the society. If that is your desire, then Sri Chaitanya Mat will decide about your going to America to preach and make all the arrangements. It can never be the principle of the society to let one act according to his individual attempt or desire. The society will decide, after consulting with the heads, what is to be done by whom. This is what I want to say. First of all, it is necessary to identify oneself with the society. In order to preach in America or in other foreign countries, it is important to have a dignified organization in the background, and secondly, it is necessary to establish oneself in India before going to preach in foreign countries. Now, it is that there are no conferences or meetings in the West as before. Communication is done through the media of television. Abai could understand the needs and priorities of the Chaitanya Mat, but he could not allow them to overrule what he considered the highest mandate, preaching as Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had ordered. Abai had offered his services to the leaders of Chaitanya Mat, thinking they might also see things his way. He thought that with the world's crying need for Krishna consciousness staring them in the face, they might see that this Abai Babu was convinced and enthusiastic, and so should be sent right away with whatever he required. But they had other priorities. Abai next turned to Keshava Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshava Maharaj told Abai to take sannyas immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abai had felt some uncertainty about accepting sannyas, and now that he was being encouraged so strongly, he resisted. But Keshava Maharaj was insistent. Srila Prabhupada says, I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting renounced order of life, no one can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted, Practically, my spiritual master insisted he wanted me to become a preacher, so he forced me through this godbrother. You accept. So, unwillingly, I accepted. So, another couple pages to the end of the chapter entitled Resident of Vrindavan, to the new chapter, This Momentous Hour of Need. Kesavaji Gaudiya Math was located in the midst of one of Mathura's downtown bazaars. Its main entrance, an arched doorway, led into a courtyard open to the sky through a metal grating above. The architecture was similar to that of the Vamsi Gopalaji temple. The atmosphere was secluded, as in a monastery. Abai was the familiar, welcomed figure here. He had lived here, written and studied in the library here, edited the Gaudiya Patrika, and donated the deity of Lord Chaitanya, who stood on the altar beside the deities of Radha and Krishna. Sri Sri Radha Vinoda Viharji. But his visit during September of 1959 was not an ordinary one. He entered the mat dressed in white, Abai Babu, but he would soon be leaving dressed in saffron, a Swami. Abai had been living as a renunciate for 9 years. There was no need for him to observe a ceremony to proclaim himself a sadhu by changing to saffron dress. But it was the parampara system that a man take Tridandi sannyasi at the end of his life. He was aware of the cheating sannyasis. Even in Vrindavan, he had seen so many sadhus who did not preach but simply spent their days hunting for chapatis. Some swamis of Vrindavan even indulged illicitly in what they had supposedly come here to reject: sex life. Such persons were making a mockery of sannyas. And there were the caste Goswamis also, who lived like ordinary householders, running temples as a business to support their families and accepting honor and donations from the public on the false basis of birth. Abai knew of these abuses of sannyas, but he also knew the real purpose of sannyas. Sannyas was for preaching. On the morning of September 17, 1959, in the 50 by 25-foot deity room on the second floor of the Kesavaji Math, a group of devotees sat before the deities of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. The deities were colorfully dressed in royal clothing and silver crowns. Radharani's right hand faced palm forward in benediction for the worshipper. At her side, her left hand held a flower for Krishna. Krishna stood like a dancer, placing his right leg in a casual tiptoe pose before his left, playing his long silver flute, which he held gracefully to his red lips. His long black hair reached down past his shoulders, and the garland of marigolds around his neck reached down to his knees. On his right stood the deity of Lord Chaitanya. His right arm raised, left arm at his side, his body straight and feet together. He was a soft golden color, and he had large eyes, a well-formed red mouth, and straight black hair down to his shoulders. One level below the deities were pictures of the spiritual masters in disciplic succession: Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and Bhakti Pragyana Keshava Maharaj. Abai sat on a mat of kusha grass beside 90-year-old Sanatana, also to receive sannyas that day. Sitting opposite the two candidates Narayan Maharaj, Keshava Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. Prabhupada and Narayan Maharaj, they had nice relationship. Keshava Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother, was preparing to give sannyas to Abai, Prabhupada. And his disciple, Narayan Maharaj, was preparing the necessary ingredients to conduct the ceremony. So they're very closely associated. He actually, yeah, okay. So Narayan Maharaj, Keshava Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, Abai's godbrother, known for sweet singing, played mridanga and sang Vaishnava bhajans. Sitting on a raised asana, His Holiness Keshava Maharaj presided. Since there had been no notices or invitations, only the Mat's few residents attended. Narayan Maharaj chanted the required mantras and then sat back silently while Keshava Maharaj lectured. Then, to everyone's surprise, Keshava Maharaj asked Abai to speak. Abai had not expected this. As he looked around at the gathering of devotees, he understood that the common language was Hindi. Only Keshava Maharaj and a few others spoke English. Yet he knew he must speak in English. After Abai's speech, each initiate received his sannyas danda, the traditional head-high staff made of 4 bamboo rods bound together and completely enwrapped in saffron cloth. They were given their sannyas garments, 1 piece of saffron cloth for a dhoti, 1 for a top piece, and 2 strips for underwear. They also received tulasi neck beads and the sannyas mantra. Keshava Maharaj said that Abai would now be known as Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and that Sanatana, who was 90 years old, would be Muni Maharaj. After the ceremony, the 2 new sannyasis posed for a photo, standing on either side of their sannyas guru, who sat in a chair. And there is a picture of this, if I can find it. It's a famous picture. Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I thought there was a picture. Ah, yes. So, yeah, right. Woo! Okay, here we go. This is the picture with the new 90-year-old sannyasi Muni Maharaj, Keshava Raj in the middle, and Prabhupada looking very, very sober and stern. I don't know if you can see it. Haribol! That's the picture. Prabhupada, Keshava in the middle, and the very, very old man on the other side. Jai. Hare Krishna. All right, so Keshava Maharaj didn't impose any strictures on Abai. He simply encouraged him to go on preaching. Yet Abai knew that to become A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did not mean merely that he was to give up family, home comforts, and business. That he had already done 5 years ago. Changing from white cloth to saffron cloth, from Abai Babu to Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, had a special significance. It was the mandate he had required the irrevocable commitment. Now, it was only a matter of time before Bhaktivedanta Swami would travel to the west as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordained. This was Bhaktivedanta Swami's realization of his new sannyas status. The Gaudiya Patrika's account of the sannyas initiation included a biographical sketch of Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj listing the major events of his life. The article concluded, seeing his enthusiasm and ability to write articles in Hindi, English, and Bengali, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj gave him the instruction to take Tridandi sannyas. For nearly 1 year, he had been ready to accept sannyas. In the month of Bhadra, on the day on which Vishvarup accepted sannyas, Vishvarup is Lord Chaitanya's older brother who accepted sannyas and left home at a very early age. So, according to the Vedic calendar, it was on the same day that Vishvarup, Lord Chaitanya's older brother, accepted sannyas. On the day on which Vishvarup accepted sannyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami at the Sri Keshavaji Gaudiya Math accepted sannyas from the founder of the Vedanta Samiti, Bhakti Prajna Keshava Maharaj. Seeing him accept his ashram of renunciation, seeing this pastime for accepting the renounced order of life, we have attained great affection and enthusiasm. And that is the end of the chapter 9, a resident of Vrindavan. And then we'll continue with chapter 10, the momentous hour of need. And there we go. Krishna. Well, I never knew that it's interesting how that is. Narayan Maharaj was very close to Prabhupada. He recited the mantras for Prabhupada's sannyas initiation. And he was a disciple of Prabhupada's godbrother, Keshava. Yeah, they're all related. Hare Krishna.